I'm the director of the Center for Science, Math, and Computer Education, where Kevin's part of his assignment is here. I think Kevin has created a wonderful workshop, the 17th Astronomy Education Workshop. I will say that while I was working at the National Science Foundation, I heard Laura speak, and one of the best talks I've heard in 4 years at the National Science Foundation. So I think that's wonderful. The idea that Greg Snow is going to talk about gravitational waves was one of the most stunning scientific achievements of a decade or two, I guess. And so I think you'll have a great day. To welcome you, I want to introduce Dondi Plowman, the Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Academic Officer here at UNL. She oversees academic affairs, the Office of Research, the Student Affairs. Prior to being named the Executive Vice Chancellor, she was the James and Susan Stewart Endowed Dean of the College of Business, where she raised $150 million, including $84 million for that building right on the corner of Vine and I think 14th Street. That's a stunning new building. She increased college enrollment by 22%, added 70 new faculty. Before she came to Nebraska, she was head of the Department of Management at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. She received her PhD in Strategic Management at the University of Texas in Organizational Change, Leadership, and Decision Making. It's a pleasure to introduce you, Don.
Thank you very much. I usually suggest that they drop that line about having gotten my degree at Texas, like in Nebraska. That doesn't go over so well. But listen, I want to just, first of all, thank you for being here today, and thank you for what you do. To welcome you on behalf of the university. We are, and I'm so proud of our this department and this program. I'm proud of this university. And one of the things I just want to say very directly to each of you, we all recognize kind of what's going on in the world right now, and never has the value of science been more important or more in some areas questioned. And so we need you to partner with us in helping us attract students to science. I know you're doing it every single day, but we need more young people interested in STEM. We need more women. There's so many opportunities. And we need people who are eager to learn and want to try to change the world. And so that's the kind of thing that's happening here at the university. And I know that you're the gatekeepers in a way for us to the university. So that's just like a shameless plug for the university and asking you to keep helping us like you do. This university, while in many ways seems big, students tell me all the time, it's a big university that feels small. It's very eager. It's easy to come here and find a group to be part of and find your own community, and oftentimes that happens in a department, in a major, in student organizations. And so when you're thinking about young people that are really bright, we hope you'll encourage them this way. So I just want to say on behalf of the university, welcome to everyone. Really thrilled for our guest speaker here. I think this program, I want to say to the department, is such a great example of the way in which a really mindful land-grant university interacts with the state to try to make important changes. And so kudos to you all, Kevin especially, for your leadership with this. So I'm very eager for you all to begin, and so I'm standing between you and your guest speaker. So thank you very much for coming, and welcome to the university.
Thank you, Dondi, for your remarks. I know I felt very welcomed at the University of Nebraska. I'm a first-year grad student here. My name is Emily Welch, and I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker to you. Her name is Laura Trouille, and she's the Vice President of Citizen Science at Adler Planetarium. In that position, she helps people connect to science in a really cool way, and today she'll be speaking to us about how we can use this in introductory level courses, how we can help our students connect to science in a really cool way. She's classically trained. She has a bachelor's degree in physics from Dartmouth University and a PhD in astronomy from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she studies galaxy evolution. So we're so pleased to have her here. If you please join me in welcoming her, Laura Trouille.
Thanks, Emily. So remind me the time that we have You want to get to the next part at
59 minutes.
59 minutes, excellent. We're a small enough group so that as I talk, if you have a question or something comes up or you just want to add like, oh, I've tried this, or just chime in, because this is a much more interesting conversation if it's two-way. And I really look forward just to the whole day of discussions and workshops, and I'll do a session later that dives deep into the classroom.zooniverse stuff, so if you're interested in that. I'll also lead one of a brainstorm session about how you might use this free project builder platform that I'll talk about in classroom settings. So the general goal is, I'm sure all of you are familiar with citizen science, but I'll just give a foundational definition of it and give examples not just of Zooniverse, but of all the different types of citizen science experiences that are on my radar of how it's being used in the classroom. And then I'll go a little bit more deeply into Zooniverse and the types of things that we've been trying, particularly through a National Science Foundation grant that Kevin helped support when he was a program officer there. And then we'll sort of end with a little bit of the frontiers and where we're headed and the types of open questions we have, and maybe my hopes for some conversations to have today, tapping into all of your expertise and what you've seen work in your classrooms. So first, just the broadest definition of citizen science is engaging the public in meaningful and valued ways in real research. And so that takes many, many different forms. And I'll only touch on a few of them. So there's a growing number. So citizenscience.gov lists over 400 active citizen science projects, and a lot of them are of a in-person, hands-on environmental action or social environmental justice type projects. I thought I'd highlight a few, particularly that have a connection with classrooms. So eBird has a whole bird sleuth curriculum. Actually, does anybody use this in their classrooms? You might not be the right disciplinary, but so bird sleuth is a whole set of curricula using the eBird bird watching type programs and how to bring research experiences into their classroom. Something I like about their setup is that they have a journal that the students publish in, and then that's shared within all the hundreds of classrooms across the country that are using this. There's a growing number of bio-blitzes that happen. Sometimes they're locally focused, so it's a number of different organizations in a city or a town that are all collecting data about invasive plant species or birds that they're seeing or migratory patterns. And iNaturalist and eBird and other platforms. So iNaturalist is a mobile app where you take a photo of something that you see, it goes into a national database, and you can either tag it with what you think you've seen in that photo, like a little green frog, or you can have the online community tagging your image so that you can identify what's in it and what the behavior is. And again, that ties into a national or international database that then researchers are actively using to understand impact of climate change, migratory pattern changes, and just all sorts of research questions. The picture on the right is of a program in Colorado. It's a partnership between the National Atmospheric Organization and University of Colorado and the teacher community in Denver in particular. And they were noticing, they did satellite imaging of the area over the past 30 years and noticed certain neighborhoods were being deforested or the tree canopy was decreasing. And so they did a whole research program on identifying what types of trees and where to help the biodiversity in that area. But it was a true partnership between the teachers and the researchers, and then the teachers and their students carrying out the research and then planting the trees as well. So there's just all sorts of fascinating models for how to engage your students in real research and the types of partnerships to explore. There's also a slew of lab-based classroom experiences that are growing, like the Small World Initiative, the Genomic Education Partnership, and the general model, and I'll share all these slides, so I'll share the references and the websites, but the general model is you have your students go out and take soil samples or other samples of in their local environment, and then you do, this is not so as Emily mentioned, I'm an astronomer, do galaxy evolution. You do something in the lab to understand what the microorganisms are. But there's dozens of publications that have come out of I think there's over 500 different classrooms at the high school level and at undergrad level who have been doing this lab-based research experiences. But key is that it's feeding into a national database, and there are researchers who are poised to use these results to find new microorganisms. And the students and the teachers are co-authors with the researchers on these articles, which is, it's both, it's a big motivator for the students and the teachers, but it's also just a way to move research forward. It's not just happening in your classroom, but it's tying into a national or broader effort. I'm trying to remember the others along the, oh, right, the next slide is, so another version of this is is taking that same model but into an online environment. And so one of the early ones was iWire, which is mapping the neurons in your brain. So anybody can go and take part in that project. Another model or version of that is Eterna. So Eterna is the next generation of the Foldit platform. You may have played with Foldit, which was protein molecule folding and finding the best structures, most viable structures. Eterna is an online citizen science platform where you're doing similar kind of folding of molecules. Again, not my field of research, but each year they have a particular goal. In 2018, their goal is to find the correct structures that will be able to attack tuberculosis and help find cures for tuberculosis. And so what's different about Eterna is that you have your students or the teachers or anybody in the community, in the public, are going online and trying to find different structures that could work. And then at Stanford, they're synthesizing those things in the lab and then testing it with tuberculosis and seeing the impact. And so this has led to many publications as well. It's a really low barrier to entry way of getting your students directly involved in real research that are addressing like major issues, problems today. A very different model that I just wanted to put on the radar before I dive into a bit more Zooniverse-focused material is at Bard College, and there's a few different universities that are starting to explore this. So Bard College is doing their January term. Every single freshman student on campus is taking part in citizen science. And so each year they have a different focus of where to focus their attention. This year it's a social environmental justice type project, and so they bring in external experts who run different seminars on the research area, and then they have different citizen science projects where the students are collecting data, analyzing data, discussing the results, but it's with real research problems and questions and impact that they're going for. Okay, so turning more a little bit to the Zooniverse side of things, maybe first to add to Emily's sort of biography that she provided. So my background is I'm an astronomer, studied supermassive black holes. I love telescopes. My PhD was going to telescopes and taking data, but all along the way, I've always been interested in wanting to understand how to engage the public in science. So when I went to Northwestern for my postdoc, already there I started exploring possibilities. And Northwestern is part of a team, this is a bit aside from this, but there's an ongoing project to bring computational thinking and modeling materials into high school science and math classrooms. It's the CT STEM project at Northwestern. So if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to talk about that. But if you just Google CT STEM Northwestern, there's some really interesting curriculum materials and assessments that they've been developing. They've been working closely with Chicago Public School teachers, high school physics, math, biology, chemistry teachers in developing those curricula, testing them over the last 6 years. And so as a postdoc at Northwestern, that was my first real, I was deeply involved in that project, one of the co-PIs for that. And that was the next step towards this career transition where now, as Emily mentioned, I lead the citizen science efforts at the Adler Planetarium. I've been in this role for the last 3 years. But before that, I was a jointly appointed astronomer between Northwestern and the Adler Planetarium. Just a deep relationship between those two the Adler and the universities in Chicago, and so we have these joint appointment positions. And I know you all play this role as well of being sort of translators or ambassadors between the research, the science, the research community, the science community, and the general public, or people who may not have any science identity, but you're one of those first steps in how to help build that, and just not necessarily to make future astronomers or engineers, but just to have people start developing those skills and ways of thinking about the world and understanding the process of science. But it's so important to have you as like ambassadors and translators to the different communities. So Zooniverse has been exploring a few different ways of bringing citizen science into classroom environments, or into education environments, both formal and informal. I'll talk in particular about our work at the undergrad, like Astro 101 type courses, but it's really introductory courses for non-STEM majors, but it translates really well into the high school environment. We also, my department at the Adler is the Department of Citizen Science. Half of it is the Zooniverse team, the other half is our teen programs, and so we do tons of in-person, hands-on experiences with a focus on Chicago's South and West Side youth. And so I'd be happy to speak about those Adler teen programs separately. Okay, so Zooniverse. For those of you who might not be familiar with it, it's the largest platform for online citizen science. It started in 2007, and so we've had 10 or 11 years now to build and grow and understand what to do and how to do this. It went from one project, which I'll describe in a moment, Galaxy Zoo, to supporting over 140 different projects with 1.7 million people around the world. And it's across the disciplines. So it started in astronomy, but now it's through zoology, to ecology, to climate science, to cancer research, to arts and humanities. But to give a sense for how it works, it's back in 2007, the Sloan Digital Sky Survey was this amazing data set of 1 million images of galaxies. And the research team, in order to work with that data, to actually pursue their research questions of how galaxies change over time, all they needed to know was, is that a spiral or an elliptical galaxy? And so with 1 million galaxies, they said, okay, grad student Kevin Schwinsky, go and do all the classifications. And so he started, and for a month he classified 24/7, classified 50,000 of the galaxies, which is amazing and kind of insane. But that's only a small drop in the bucket. And so it was the recognition that human eyes, our ability to recognize patterns is really expert. Whether you're 5 years old or 5 years old, you can tell the difference between those two galaxies. And Angry Birds was really popular at the time. People collectively were spending 16 years every hour playing Angry Birds. So they thought, well, what if we try this experiment of harnessing the power of the crowd to unlock the data? And so Galaxy Zoo was born. And in the first hours, they were getting 50,000 classifications an hour. The site kept crashing because it couldn't handle the traffic. In the first year, 150,000 people participated and contributed millions of classifications so that they could retire the whole data set or classify the whole data set and then get into the actual research questions. And over the years, there have been 45 or so peer-reviewed publications that have come from the Galaxy Zoo data sets. That first publication, I think it is important to note that it was a slog to get through the peer review process. It was such an unusual and different approach, and there was so much skepticism, deep skepticism that the public could provide quality, reliable results. And just such I'm sure in your position, you understand how much knowledge and authentic authority that the public can bring to science, but especially 10 years ago, but very much in different disciplines still today, there's a deep skepticism that the public can contribute in meaningful ways to research. And so it's only because 45 people look at every image in Galaxy Zoo, and 43 out of the 45 say, yeah, that's a spiral. You can be really confident in that result. It's also, for hundreds of the images, we had experts classify them, and then we compared that to the consensus result. And we found in Galaxy Zoo, it's 98% of the time the consensus result agrees with the experts. In the few percent where it doesn't, it's because even the experts can't agree with each other. And so we've proven that you have quality data that comes out of the public's engagement in science. So Galaxy Zoo was a wonderful proof of concept. And since then, as I mentioned, we've gone from Galaxy Zoo to supporting projects in ecology, like Snapshot Serengeti, looking at images of animals, to really just fascinating history projects, transcribing handwritten letters of the Abolitionist Network of William Lloyd Garrison. That's the Anti-Slavery Manuscripts Project. Lots of different projects all across the disciplines. Since this is a physics-focused audience, although my sense is there's quite a number of different disciplines that you all teach, I thought I'd highlight some of the physics ones. So Gravity Spy, and it also ties into Greg's talk later today, so I won't steal your thunder, but Gravity Spy is all about gravitation, the search for gravitational waves, but really it's about cleaning the data. So this is blips and whistles are glitch types or noise type signals in the gravitational wave LIGO data. And so Gravity Spy invites the public to help us clean out all those noise signals so that it's, because it's a needle in a haystack problem, so the more noise you can get rid of, the stronger your signal is. And it's a partnership between Northwestern, Cal State Fullerton, Syracuse University, and the whole LIGO collaboration of 1,000+ people. And it's one of the projects in Zooniverse that's really exploring the integration of machine learning into the system. So the images, several thousand images come out of the detector every day that, there's tens of thousands of signals that come out of the detector every day. Machine learning cleans out many of them as like automatically, yes, I know that that's that kind of noise type or that's that type of glitch. But several thousand of them pass through and then get shown to our volunteers. And then our volunteers continuously create more training data for the machine learning algorithms to better clean out the data automatically. It's also one of the few projects we have that's experimenting with a leveling system. So this is level 1 in Gravity Spy, where you're just choosing between 2 glitch types. You can get all the way to level 5, where you're choosing between 23 different glitch types. So as you do classifications and show that you're providing quality data compared to expert classified images, you unlock the next level in the system. And we found that that's a really, it works well as a motivator for people to continue engaging and wanting to unlock the next level. Another example is from Joliet Junior College, which is a community college in the Chicago area. And the researcher has tons of data of images from steel pans and the vibrations, the acoustic waves that propagate through the steel pan, the drum itself. And so people go in and it's a marking task. You're just circling where those, where the nodes are. And it's also a machine learning project because we know that we can do this in automated ways. We just need to build up the training set for the machine learning algorithm to be confident enough and quality enough. So those are some examples of physics-based projects. I thought then I'd just dive into some of the work we've been doing bringing this into classroom environments. So if you go to classrooms.zooniverse.org, that's a portal for teachers to access some of these newer curricular materials that we've been building. I was chatting before this talk, and there's also a site called ZooTeach. So if you Google ZooTeach and Zooniverse, that's another portal for curricular materials that teachers have created over the last 10 years using different Zooniverse projects. There's also studentsdiscover.org. I don't know if some of you may already be using that site. Students Discover is a partnership, I believe, based in North Carolina. I think so, where it's teachers from North Carolina partnered with researchers at the university, and every summer they do a teacher institute. And their focus is, with all the existing citizen science projects and platforms, what are some good curricular materials we can create around those efforts? And so there's a few Zooniverse projects that have been used as the core piece of a curriculum that was put onto Students Discover. But classrooms.zooniverse is the portal we've created over the last few years with support from the National Science Foundation. And here I'll talk most about the Astro 101, but we've been doing parallel efforts funded by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute around ecology projects using our Snapshot Serengeti style projects. But the Astro 101 work, the idea was how might we create a small group research experience using Zooniverse projects in an introductory science classroom environment, geared particularly for non-STEM majors. And the general method was to have 4 in-class activities, a half hour or shorter, that introduce the students to this data analysis platform that we created, which is just really Google Sheets with a few custom add-on tools. And then an out-of-class small group research experience using Galaxy Zoo, a curated set of Galaxy Zoo data. And the goals were really, how can we lift the veil on how science works? How can we create an experience in a classroom setting where they get an authentic experience around the processes of science, of collecting data, analyzing data, asking questions, discussing with their peers, communicating their results. So the study started 4 years ago, and we partnered with 5 different institutions, and the idea was to test it in a lot of different environments. So community college environments, small liberal arts college, Research 1 type institutions, small class sizes, 25 students versus 150 students, just to see how to adapt it to those different settings, quarter versus semester systems, etc. So by the end, we tested it with over 700 students and done pre and post surveys and trying to understand the impact and the use and ease of implementation and all that good stuff. The timeline for a semester-based course was to front load the in-class activities, of course, near the beginning of the course, have the in-class activities address material that teachers would be addressing anyways in an astronomy course, so the HR diagram, Hubble's law, galaxy types. So those are during the first 4 weeks. And then in the latter half of the course, students spend 15 to 20 hours outside of class time, or in the community college context, they used in-class time to pursue the small group research projects. And so when you go from the classrooms.zooniverse portal and you just click enter, this is the site that it brings you to. And we heard from the instructors that it was really useful to be able to track students' progress on the different, especially in the in-class activities. A couple of the in-class activities use a Zooniverse project, and so they wanted to know, well, how many classifications? If I said my assignment was to do 20 classifications on the Galaxy Zoo project, how do I know if my students have actually done that? And so this is just a way where when you click on your class, you can then see the students who are participating and their percent completion. And it just makes it a little bit easier on you all to not have to track that yourselves. And then it's links to the instructor guides and all the handouts, and the students also have access through a student portal to all those materials. So examples of the in-class activities, and I'm sure there's so many different versions of these same activities, because you always, in a typical Astro 101 or introductory astronomy course, you always talk about star clusters and the HR diagram. You always talk about Hubble's law and how we understand the age of our universe. And so there's many, many different versions of that. And so today it'd be fun to hear what your version of this in-class activity is. The only difference for us is we wanted to use these very common activities as a way not only to teach that content and have hit those learning objectives, but give the students an experience with the data analysis tool so that before they start their research project, they've already played around in the environment and are just familiar with it. So 8 years ago, we created a custom data analysis platform called ZooTools that was a miserable failure because it's really hard to create a well-done data analysis interface. And in the interim, Google Sheets, Excel spreadsheets, all the different tools that you use in your classroom are more and more user-friendly, student-friendly. And so we thought, well, no reason to reinvent the wheel. Let's just build on what Google Sheets already provides. And there's a developer toolkit where you can add custom plots or custom interfaces into Google Sheets. So we just have this add-on tool into Google Sheets now still called Zoo Tools, but it's just within the Google Sheets environment. Out of curiosity, how many of you in your classrooms use Google Sheets? Okay. Yeah, so that was part of our survey at the beginning, was what are instructors using? Often Astro 101 course instructors are starting to use Google Sheets more and more. How many of you use Excel spreadsheets? Yeah. So it's still about half and half. Who uses something totally neither of those? Okay. Yeah, what else is there? So we have a version there's no reason, if you're a classroom that's using Excel spreadsheets, there's no reason to then have to teach your students how to use Google Sheets. So there's a version of the curriculum where it's just, and then do this in Excel spreadsheets rather than in Google Sheets. But here I'll show the Google Sheets version of it. Again, it was like, what is the lowest barrier to entry? How little training and additional stuff does an instructor need to do the students need to do to just be able to dive straight into the data analysis and what we care about here? So you can see that there's just the spreadsheet of data for the star cluster aging one. It's looking at 5 different star clusters and then comparing their HR diagrams with each other, and the students have to put them in the order of the youngest to the oldest star cluster. It's a really common activity, but again, it's just to get them used to manipulating within the data analysis tool they'll use in their research experience. The third of the activities is they go to Galaxy Zoo, the citizen science project, they classify on it, and we have a curated set of galaxies that we ask them to classify in addition to just classifying on the full site. And then the in-class activity is really using citizen science to talk about data reliability and validity, and talk about what I mentioned earlier and how over the years we've been able to set up a reputation of having reliable results because of this consensus process of many people looking at each image. There's also an aspect, because in the research project, they are working with a data set of, I believe in the end it's 25,000 galaxies, but the researchers are working with 1 million galaxies. And there's something very anonymous when it's new to you to work with something like there's 1 million galaxies. And so by doing this activity, they get to know a few galaxies in detail. It's kind of you're sort of personalizing a set of 10 galaxies, so that when they start looking for broader trends in the bigger data set, it just helps to make sense of something where you're looking at big trends when you know a few individuals and you can place them in those plots as individuals. There's all sorts of interesting education research on how to teach students or have students think about big data, and it really helps to sort of first start with something small, get to know the trends within the small set, and then be able to look at trends across the bigger data set. So in this activity, the students first classify in out-of-class time, and then in class, you look at a set of 10 of the galaxies in detail and talk about, so in the upper left, in that image, it's pretty clear there are 2 galaxies and they're running into each other. So that's why 64 of the 67 students in that class said there's a merger happening. So you can be really confident in that result, and you see it. It's just visually it's pretty obvious. But this image down here, 12 of the students said it was spiral, 30 of them said it was elliptical. It's a little bit less sure or the confidence is lower in terms of what the result should be. We also compare to what the whole Galaxy Zoo set of volunteers classified for that image. So of the 55 people who classified that image, what's the breakdown in results? We just have a conversation with the students about what it means in terms of how to use uncertain results in your plots, how to include that in your error bars. So there's a whole conversation here around the statistical analysis, really just the simplest things of how to create error bars and what that means in citizen science. And so it's just an interesting lens or a different way to talk about the types of things you're already talking about in your classroom. So then in the latter half of the course, the students dive into their small group research project. And so you'll see it looks very similar to the in-class activity from before. It's just here you have your 20,000 galaxies. You have you have the breakdown in number of classifications for elliptical versus spiral, and then we add some additional metadata about each galaxy, like the color, the distance, the mass, other information that researchers have learned about that galaxy. And then the research experience is that when we first experimented with this, we just had the students dive in right away. We're like, okay, here's your data set. Now think of a question and go. And, and so I see your reaction. Yeah, of course that didn't work. So now first we do a very guided research experience where all the students in their small groups address the question of, are all spirals blue and are all ellipticals red? And we have a sort of handout or a guide that steps them through the process of how do you answer that question, and what kinds of plots do you create, and how do you talk about the plots that you've created. And so the end result of that is that actually no, there's a really interesting subset of spirals that are not blue and of ellipticals that are not red, and what does that mean? And so they have you have a discussion around that first result. And then from that first result, the students then have gotten familiar with the data, with the types of things they might see, and then we have them come up with their own research question to then pursue. And there's sort of milestones along the way of they have to turn in these key plots that they've created in trying to address their question. And then they create 4-minute videos and do a peer review of the videos that they've created. And the video is not only, these are our key plots and this is what we think we've learned about, say whatever the research question was that they asked, but they also have to talk about what they learned about the process of science and what, just more of the sort of social, emotional experience that they had through this research process. And so the different types of impact, on the positive end, we found that, so there were quotes like these. My favorite was when the small groups, as part of their video, they would talk about, doing this made me realize how easy it is to manipulate data. Kind of goes back to your comments from the beginning, is to me, one of the most important things we could be helping the next generation right now is to know how to ask questions, to be comfortable and confident being curious, but to know that data is so easily manipulated to support one thought or another. And so understanding how that process of working with data, just being comfortable with data, was really an important impact for us. The other was that the way the experience is set up, and I think it's also that we highlight how the Galaxy Zoo researchers are using these data in the we make an emphasis on the creativity that's involved in terms of coming up with the questions, coming up with your pathways to solutions. You can have 3 different research teams doing the same question, more or less, but they all come up with different ways to try to answer it. Just so the highlighting of the creativity, that it's not a cookie cutter or cookbook. You do this, this, and this, and then you get to this answer. There's also a number of the small groups, and in this afternoon session, I think this will happen as well. There's a lot of null results. There's a lot of times where you ask a question and it's you just come up with a null result, but we have specific conversations about how those results are really important, and sharing those results are really important, and that's part of the step of knowing, well, what's the next question that you would ask? Well, that's part of the 4-minute videos. They have to include like what the question is that they asked, what the results they got, but then what are the next questions that you would ask if you continued this. So those are on the positive side. On the neutral side, the other very much positive was just in the interviews with all the instructors at the 5 different institutions, just because the instructors helped us create the materials and helped us create the platform, there's a lot of just positive in terms of ease of use, and being able to fit it into their curriculum and their existing methods and styles. And so generally it's a relatively easy to implement set of materials, so that's a positive. On the neutral was in the surveys of students in terms of comparing a course that used these materials versus the same instructor teaching the course without the materials. There was a neutral impact in terms of the students' enjoyment of the course and in terms of the students learning around the HR diagram and the scientific concepts of the course. We took that as an okay victory. We didn't negatively impact the course by taking so much time out to allow for this experience of doing data analysis and research and that. But it is something in this next round we would like for it to have a bit more of a positive impact rather than just purely neutral in terms of just the students, just the spark that the course provided for them. Being at the Adler Planetarium, we often think of ourselves, or we hope to provide sort of complementary experience to what is available in classroom environments, just in terms of the spark and remembering that there's this joy and wonder, and it's just awesome to be able to do research. And the thing that we have created so far doesn't quite translate, or the students don't quite get that piece, that it's beautiful. Our universe is a beautiful thing to get to work with, and our research experience doesn't quite have enough of those elements in it, of just the fun of science. So things that we're gonna continue working on, and I would happily, if you have suggestions on just how to introduce these types of experiences in a classroom and also capture just the fun, please bring that my way. So I mentioned the next phase is that we're bringing, so we have the next National Science Foundation grant sort of based on what we've learned so far. They have kindly said, okay, let's keep learning, let's keep pushing where this can go. And part of it will be, we're going to expand the Galaxy Zoo experience we've created to geoscience, introductory geoscience courses and introductory biology courses. So because Zooniverse is a platform that supports projects across the disciplines, we're going to expand on the astronomy and ecology work and into geoscience. So just a note for those of you who might also teach biology type classes or environmental science class, the WildCam lab work is similar to the Galaxy Zoo effort, where you end up with a curated data set and students can ask research questions of that data. But the difference, or an additional piece to it, is the mapping tools. So here's the Gorongosa National Park in Africa. And it shows, the bubbles show where all the different cameras are set up. And so some of the research questions are about migratory patterns across this national reserve. And so you can filter your data set for different times of year or different areas in the park and ask all sorts of research questions along those lines. And then in the geoscience, one of the first projects we'll use is our floating forest project. So we want to create curricular materials around climate change impact, looking at these giant kelp beds and 30 years of data from NASA Landsat imaging. And so it's a global set of data over time, and the students can ask all sorts of questions about looking at temperature changes in the ocean and how you see differences in the size of the kelp beds across different seasons of a year and then across the decades. And part of the broader goal by expanding into geoscience and biology, and this could be true within a single high school, we've been thinking about it in terms of a college campus. So if you could, because you have hundreds of thousands of students taking Astro 101 each year, but in a single college campus, if you have all your students who take intro geoscience or intro bio or intro astronomy, and they all get exposed to the same kind of general framework for a research experience in their classroom, and they all get the same exposure to all the citizen science opportunities that are available. We're just thinking in terms of critical mass on a college campus of all the freshmen. I mean, that's the freshmen who would take those 3 courses are 80% of your non-STEM majors. And so if you have them all sharing that common language and common background, it just becomes really interesting in terms of sort of organizational change and some of the things that you've been thinking a lot about. So that effort starts May of 2019. We'll be hiring an educator within the Zooniverse team and really diving deep with partnerships with 6 different institutions, again, across a spread of different institution types. We're really excited to dive into that. So the general design principles, which I'm sure is there's so much overlap to probably everything you create in your classrooms, is how do you have a very low barrier to entry? How can you have a really high threshold in terms of the students who could go really far into something? What tools and resources and support can you provide to them so that you're reaching the whole spectrum of students in your classroom? We thought a lot about starting with a data analysis tool set that was appropriate for the audience. So no reason to be teaching Python in an Astro 101 type course setting, but really even more so, what are instructors already using and how could we just insert into that existing tool set that you're familiar with. And then the basic principle of citizen science is, can whatever you do in your classroom feed into a much broader national or international effort? How do we make what we're doing, and there's such good work that students are turning out in a classroom setting, but how can you have that have an impact beyond your classroom walls? So let's see, tell me where I am with time. I could...
Lots of time.
Lots of time. Well, that's just a few more things, and then there'll be lots of time for questions. Democratizing access to these research tools. So I just wanted to come back. I mentioned at the beginning, we have this free project builder platform. This afternoon, I'll lead one of the 30-minute sort of breakout sessions, because I would love your help in how to use this free interface that allows you to build your own Zooniverse project for free. We have over 1,800 people have used it, but it's really researchers at universities who are thinking about how to use it to unlock their data. And we want to understand, are there possible uses for classrooms or teachers? So to back up, in 2015, when I joined the Zooniverse team, we launched this free project builder platform. And so before that time, so it's a web development team that I lead. I have 5 web developers, a designer, a postdoc, and then we partner close with the University of Oxford in the UK, and they have a team of about 10 on their web development side for Zooniverse, and then some other partnerships around the world. So before 2015, as a team, we'd launch 3 to 5 projects a year, because it would take 6 months to a year of a developer's time to create the Snapshot Serengeti custom website. In 2015, we launched this free tool, which I'll show in a moment. And then we went from launching 3 a year to launching 26. And then 26 in 2016 and 40 in 2017, 40 new projects. And now we're looking at 55 or so in 2018. The interface, again, in terms of low barrier to entry, it's just pretty much like WordPress, but for citizen science. It's a drag and drop your subjects into it. It's a text interface. You just type in the text that you want to show up on your website's page. It's where you go to get the classification results that all your volunteers have submitted. And so it's a simple browser-based interface to create an online citizen science project. And so in the last 18 months, we've launched over 80 new projects. And it's not us launching it, it's the hundreds of researchers around the world who are using this platform to build their own project. And then they click apply for review. And if they want it to go to the whole Zooniverse, 1.7 million people around the world community, they apply for review, and 90,000 of our volunteers have signed up to be reviewers. And so the site becomes just tagged as under review. It gets sent to this newsletter of people who want to provide feedback, and there's a standard feedback form in terms of content, making sure it makes sense, making sure the classification task is appropriate, making sure the project itself is appropriate for the Zooniverse platform. So it's really fun to be a reviewer of all the new projects that are coming in, and just seeing the different ways that researchers are using this to unlock their data. And then I thought I'd just mention the different scales of projects. So we have projects like, and this is also just a fun astronomy project to highlight. So Space Warps is a needle in a haystack kind of project where there's eventually there will be 800,000 images that are processed through this, and they're just looking for gravitationally lensed galaxies. And it's because there's so many images, we partnered with Science Friday, which is a public radio program, to do a 1,000,000 classification challenge back in May. So we went on one Friday and said, come join us on Space Warps, we really need your help. We'd like to get 1,000,000 classifications, and then next week we'll come back and tell you what the results were. And so the following week, we had reached that goal by, I think, Thursday night before the Friday show. And for that, over 3,000 people participated during that week and provided the 1,000,000 classifications. And we were able to identify 40 new potential lensed galaxies during that week of effort. I think some of the examples are shown here. So the idea is if you have a background galaxy and some either a cluster of galaxies or a foreground galaxy, the light from the background galaxy passes around it. There's sort of an animation of the different configurations that might happen depending on the geometry of the setup. And so there's just these beautiful different lens galaxies that were discovered during just that week, and the project's ongoing. So that's an example of a rather large data set and the need. Over the years, I think over 10,000 people have participated in Space Warps. But then you have the really small projects. Because it's a free project builder, like anybody can build their own project. This is from a tiny little village in France that somehow came across the Zooniverse, uploaded all their family genealogy, the handwritten documents into the platform, and 24 people classified all the 6,000 pages. And so we didn't need to open it up to the whole 1.7 million people around the world. It was just the right standardized tool for them to be able to unlock their data. So it has sort of different scales of use and impact. So I think, yeah, that's just, I always like to end with just mentioning the team. So I mentioned it's a partnership, and it has been since the beginning between the Adler Planetarium, with our expertise in engaging the public in science, and the University of Oxford with the expertise in data and research. It's been that sort of special sauce that has allowed Zooniverse to really be able to have the impact or grow in the right ways over the years. And so we're a team of about 20 people. The web developers, especially, just the web developers, they could be working anywhere, doing anything at different salary levels, but they work with our team because we're just an incredibly mission-driven group. And it's a pleasure working with them all. Chris Lintott is the PI for Zooniverse. He's located in Oxford, and so I serve as the co-PI. The lead of the Adler team has historically always been the co-lead for Zooniverse alongside Chris. So I think with that, I will happily welcome questions. Thanks. Yeah.
What's the time frame for someone who is up the data as far as getting any kind of results back?
It depends on the project. There are projects where there's one called what was it called? Andromeda project, that they had 30,000 images that needed processing, but they got some amazing media hits, and they were actually done within 2 weeks or some crazy. And it was a research team. It was looking for star clusters in nearby galaxies. And the research team was just so motivated and happily surprised by that enthusiastic outpouring of volunteer effort that they worked incredibly hard to get the article out, I think within a month of that. So it ended up being a 6-week project, which they thought was going to take maybe 18 months or 2 years. So sometimes it's really fast, and it's important to say that in any Zooniverse publication that is based on Zooniverse data, the volunteers, anybody who classifies on the project, are acknowledged. It's posted through a website that lists all the different names, and then any volunteers who get more deeply involved in the research through the discussion forums. So I think I failed to mention, every project has a classification interface, but also a discussion forum where the volunteers and the researchers chat about the research, but also about their interests. But whenever there are results or discoveries, the volunteers get involved in that analysis and discussion, and some of them get really deeply involved in the data analysis as well. And so those volunteers are co-authors on articles. So we have several dozen articles in astronomy alone where there are volunteers who are co-authors. Other projects, it takes at least a year to classify all the data, and then another year to do the analysis, just as happens with most research. We have part of the agreement with the research team is that the data, including the classifications, will become public after a 2-year-ish time period. But the ish is important because for some fields it just takes longer, and so we want to be respectful of the researchers' timeline as well, but the key is that it becomes public because the volunteers, the public has contributed, so it needs to be public. Does that answer? Yeah? Yeah, please.
So the Zooniverse classroom program, I know you have a registration requirement for usually to register for those classes, is that correct? Or?
So for Zooniverse.org in general, you can classify whether you're registered or not. So that's always been key, again, for the low barrier to entry. We don't want registering to be the barrier. For classrooms.zooniverse.org, as an instructor, yes, you do need to register so that you can access the materials. But it's mainly so that we know who's using the materials, and when there are updates, we can sort of send out information. For students, in order for the instructor to see, oh, Johnny has done the classifications as part of the assignment, Johnny needs to register as well. Otherwise, we don't know in the system and we can't record that.
This is specific because I know some school districts aren't allowed students to log in or use their email accounts to get into that kind of stuff because of privacy issues for low age. So is there like a Google sign in automatically or Facebook sign in automatically kind of options like that kind of stuff?
So yeah, we have a Google, there's a terminology for it, but if you have a Google address, you can sign in through that. But some institutions have some blockers even on that, and so in the teacher's guide, we describe the different scenarios and how to go about it. One of the scenarios is talking to the IT at your institution and just enabling or allowing access for those specific websites. Yeah.
Just to touch on that, a lot of schools are getting away from their own on-site filter. It's now completely web-based, and the IT does not have ability to specifically whitelist individual sites. So this is...
Yeah, it's a continuing...
Every day it gets a little more complicated, but we have to convince them it's the right thing.
Right. And it's also, it's good for us to, just to be in conversation with folks like you so that we are aware of what's changing, and then we can see if we can do things on our end that somehow enable other different types of workarounds. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I guess one more follow-up. Is it HTML5 or is it Flash-based?
It's JavaScript. And it's a React framework around JavaScript. So that's our front end, and then the back end is Ruby on Rails. Yeah. So we don't run into those issues of, key. Yeah, please.
You mentioned some of the stuff you tested were in large lecture halls. How does that work when you have the in-class stuff? It works still. So that's why we tested it in classrooms with 150 students. Mm-hmm. So in astronomy, there's now, we have a good references for how to do small group work within a large lecture-based classroom, like the University of Arizona efforts that have been coming out. And so we take a lot of those, we take those lessons learned and apply them into our in-class activity setups. So we do a lot of not the full think, pair, share type thing, but that type of working with the people right nearby. Yeah, it's a good question. All right, let's dive into the rest of the day.
Let's thank our speaker.